Nick, Whitney, good to see you.
You as
Super
well.
excited to have this conversation. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really fun conversation. We're going to be chatting about how do you deliver a great open enrollment, or OE, as we say in the biz, together. And before we dive into the content today, I want to make some introductions. I'll start with introducing myself. I'm Brandon Weber. I'm CEO and co-founder of Nava Benefits. And for those of you who are just getting to know us, Nava is the first benefits brokerage oriented entirely around the mission to provide high quality, affordable healthcare to all Americans. And we're doing that by bringing the tools and the playbook from America's largest, most sophisticated employers down market to mid-size employers, all in service of making great benefits easy for those folks, easy to understand for employees, easy to manage for the HR teams, because we know HR just has so much on their plate right now. So with me here, I'm really fortunate to be joined with just two awesome folks. First off is Whitney Stuckey. She's the People and Development Manager at the Paskin Group. She is a valued Nava client, and she is going to be playing the role of our HR leading character today in our Rom-Com twist. And then right next to her, you've got Nick Severson, who is one of Nava's amazing client managers and benefits experts. And in the rom-com world that we're playing in, Nick gets to play the trusty sidekick role, which I absolutely love. And I get to be that awesome moderator. So maybe Whitney, I'll hand the mic over to you, and why don't you share a little bit about us, about yourself and your journey to your current role as an HR leader.
Of course. Thank you. Happy to be here with both of you today, and especially Nick, my trusty sidekick. We love working with Nava here at the Paskin Group. We are a real estate investment and management company, and I'm going on 7 years with the company, which is really exciting. It's been a great journey here with the team. But I started as an actual EA, executive assistant and office manager back 7 years ago, and I had not worked in HR. I didn't have any HR experience at the time, but it didn't really matter because we only had about 30 employees back then. So our HR was kind of done by different individuals, managers. It was very piecemeal. But as we started to approach 50 employees, about 2 years into my tenure with the company, I realized that, oh, this is actually a huge part of the company that needs time, it needs attention. People care a lot about their benefits, about their perks, about making sure their onboarding experience is really smooth. So I approached our leadership team here and asked if I could potentially take on that role. And luckily, we have a great leadership team and an excellent CEO who approved me to start that journey. So I actually went with SHRM. I became CP certified through SHRM. Learned a ton about HR, relied heavily on peers and the SHRM community, which has been excellent. So for the last 5 years, I've been working in HR as our people and development manager, and now we're up to 86 employees, which is great. And a couple of years ago, I partnered with Nava as our benefits broker, and that's made our journey even more smooth, but not without hiccups, as we're going to talk about today, especially with open enrollment. But it's been great, and I look forward to working with Nava for a long time to come and learning more through SHRM. Webinars like these, I think, are great resources to be able to keep our knowledge. As everyone in HR knows, things are changing all the time. We all went through COVID together. So keeping on top of the latest trends is really important.
I love it. That's a great intro. And I think it's also really cool to hear the journey, because I bet so many people listening are on various levels of that journey themselves. Thanks, Whitney. Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your career journey too through benefits?
Yeah. I'm also happy to be here and talking about one of personally my favorite topics, which is open enrollment. But yeah, I got started in the benefits space going on 6 years ago on the communication and engagement side of a company called Jellyvision. And from there, I launched into this awesome industry, and I joined Nava in October of 2021. Which it doesn't seem like that long ago, but it is quite a ways ago in terms
Nava
of
years. That's a long time.
Yeah, in Nava years, exactly. So, but I've been loving it. Love being a client manager and working with wonderful folks like Whitney and helping set some best practices for things like open enrollment.
I love it. Yeah, we've got a great group to speak to open enrollment. Maybe I'll set kind of the context on the topic, which is benefits OE. And I think the kind of what we think about when we decided that we wanted to talk about this was that this season is very stressful for HR teams for a number of reasons, but OE is a really big one. It's kind of one of our clients has said this is the Super Bowl for HR, and you're trying to accomplish so many things. Like, how do you effectively communicate your benefits for the upcoming year in a way that your employees actually understand it, in a way that they actually value those benefits, and in a way that helps them get the most value out of the plans that they need to choose and the things that you've really worked on building as an employer. So. And then the flip side of that is you're trying to stay really close to your leadership team, C-suite, to prove out the return on investment of those benefits decisions that you fought so hard to get them to approve and partner with you on. So today's going to be really fun because we've got a real life case study here in Whitney and the Paskin Group and Nick, and we're going to tackle this topic through a real world example and really focus on covering the kind of before, during, and after open enrollment, oriented around how do we create a really successful open enrollment experience. A really fun thing that we're going to do is we spent a bunch of time putting together a customizable project planning template for OE to keep you on target, in control in this process. And the folks who actually register and join for this are going to get that in their inboxes as part of this. And you can use that to help better guide your open enrollment experience. And one thing, we've got an amazing marketing team at Nava, and they had this great idea to how can we like lighten the mood of what feels like a really heavy topic. And the idea came, which is what better way to do that than making this rom-com themed. So as we go through this, we're gonna make Whitney is our leading character in the movie. We've got our trusty sidekick. We're gonna definitely add some cheesy character references along the way, which should be fun. So why don't we dive in, Nick? I'm gonna hit you first. Let's just start with the foundation. How do you define open enrollment?
Yeah. So I think for everybody, open enrollment really revolves around one action, and that is getting employees to understand, elect, and submit their elections with regard to their benefits for that upcoming plan year. So for a lot of people, that happens in the fall, but like we have with Whitney, for example, there are plenty of companies that also have that take place at various points in the year, depending on when their actual plan contracts renew. But that's the big piece, is that it's that period of time when employees are asked to take some time out of their busy day, understand this behemoth that is the benefits package that's being offered to them and what's changing for this upcoming plan year, and then having them go in, elect, understand, and then engage with that system or whatever that election process is, and then getting that over to the carriers for that upcoming plan year. So it's kind of like the where the rubber meets the road in terms of the actual benefits that are coming down the line, if there's anything new or changes, or just getting people to continue to engage with those benefits.
Yeah, I think another frame for me is it's when your members make their purchase decision. They're choosing which insurance plans that they are going to be paying for and that you, the employer, are going to be paying for at a premium. So Whitney, over to you. Maybe characterize just what does this process typically feel like for the HR leader?
Well, it's something that we have to do. It's a big part of our job. And I would say that you kind of know it's coming. It sometimes sort of feels like it's looming. And sometimes it doesn't always feel great. It feels like another thing where you're going to be getting that email, in our case from Nava, or sometimes directly from the carriers, saying your open enrollment is coming up. We can't wait to share with you how expensive your insurance plans are going to be for this next year. And sometimes those numbers are going up by 10, 12, 14%. And oftentimes it doesn't come with any increased benefit. So it's, hey, great news. We still offer all the plans that your team knows and loves. Now they're just more expensive. And so that means they're more expensive for your employees. They're also more expensive for you as the employer. So sometimes, you're kind of waiting to get that news. You're not necessarily looking forward to sharing it with the leadership team and those responsible for the budgets. And then also your employees having to share it as well. So from my perspective, every year, we're kind of looking for, okay, what are the ways that we can try to turn this into a positive experience? What are ways that we can potentially add more benefits so that our employees feel like they're getting more value? How can we explain this to them in a way where they are seeing what we're contributing as an employer, in addition to what they feel like they're paying out of their paycheck every 2 weeks? And, I think that it's such an important part of retention, which has been such a huge focus for everyone these past couple of years, is the really realizing the cost of turnover and how expensive that is for a company, and just the time and resources it takes to train new employees. And so that by offering great benefits and having a successful open enrollment where you can really communicate those benefits and the opportunity for people to enroll is huge for retention. So trying to kind of put all of those pieces together and think of creative ways. And this is something I'll touch more on too, but Nick knows for us as a mid-size employer, which I know there's plenty of people watching this that are in our same boat, you're in that weird space where you have to offer benefits. You want to offer benefits. You don't only have, 2, 3, 5 employees. You have maybe 50 to 100 employees, but you're not a huge company where you have access to tons of benefits. You can offer fully paid benefits. You're in that space where employees are having to kind of meet you halfway. You still want to have great employees. You want them to feel valued. You want them to know that you're doing your part, but you're not able to just go, hey, here's some amazing benefits that are fully covered for you and your family. So, for the past few years for the company of our size, we're in that kind of weird spot where Nick has said, hey, as a large group, you can have access to XYZ benefits, but you're not quite there yet. You're still considered small group. And so we've had these conversations of, okay, well, how do we become a large group? And he says, well, you need to get more people enrolled. And then I say, okay, well, right now, the reason why people are not enrolling is because the benefits are so expensive. How can we potentially lower costs? And then he says, well, you really need to be a large group in order to lower costs. And then we kind of end up going on this loop. So we'll get into like how we kind of got out of that. But at least for me, I know that's why open enrollment for a few years in a row was almost something I was kind of dreading, because I just knew that there were changes that we wanted to make, but we just didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to overcome like the incredible cost associated with it. So yeah, I mean, it's a challenging time for us in HR, that's for sure, but it doesn't have to be. So hopefully we can share some positivity with everyone today.
No, I think you framed it up really well. And maybe Nick, I'll kind of flip it over to you. Like, I mean, you've supported hundreds of employers now, and in just leveling up the experience. Like, what does the ideal sort of rom-com open enrollment experience look like from your perspective?
Yeah. If I was a main character in a rom-com and like the world was just bent to my will, it would probably revolve around how everything around me is going through that open enrollment. And what I mean by that is my employees would be fully engaged, aware of, and educated on the benefits that are being offered. So there wouldn't be any questions about the benefits that are being offered. On top of that, the carriers would be coming to me and saying, wow, we've given you a decrement increase, and there's actually going to be less cost for better plans this upcoming plan year. Which is a big ask, but I think another piece is just simplicity. The system that's capturing the enrollment runs smoothly, and there's no discrepancies that come as a result. And then on the back end, when you're actually looking at how the enrollment went, it went well. The employees' behavior and what they enrolled in was what you wanted, and helps drive the business strategy forward. That's kind of like I'm the main character in this movie kind of best feeling experience I think you could get.
I love that. Whitney, anything else to add, or did Nick capture it pretty well? That idealized open.
He captured it really well, where everyone leaves, they feel like it was positive. They feel like they're paying what they should pay. They're getting the benefits that they want to have, and they're so happy to be an employee with us and to have these benefits.
I love that. Now that's a perfect segue. I think let's take that idealized sort of version of this and now maybe bring it into a reality that you guys had just a couple of months ago. So Whitney, why don't we, we're going to talk about your open enrollment experience too, because I think a lot of what you did is what we should try to recreate as best practice across the industry. Maybe we'll start though before open enrollment. So going into this year, what were your goals going into open enrollment? What were you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, well, like I kind of touched on, I really, based on the conversations that I'd had with Nick, I really wanted us to get to that place where we could be taken out to market as a large group, because, we no longer wanted to have to deal with being age banded, which I know is something that a lot of people deal with. And it can be really difficult when you're in that group to be able to go out to have other carriers, bid you out, be able to have like negotiating costs and even more plans than, having the same plans that we're offering year over year, be able to have some flexibility there. So for us, we really wanted to get over 50% of our eligible employees enrolled in a healthcare plan, because we had the numbers of employees, we just weren't having the enrollment numbers that we needed to have. So we had to take, I was like, okay, let's take a hard look at what we're offering, what, premium contribution we as an employer are offering, and is this competitive? Is this what other people are offering? What do we need to do so that we can, not this year, because we're already at open enrollment, but for next year, we want to be taken out as a large group. And then also just avoiding as many errors as possible, making sure how can we get everything really clearly communicated to the employees. And then once we have open enrollment, how can we make sure that all this information gets smoothly from our payroll processor to our carriers? Because, there's always issues, it seems like, in the past. And so just to lower stress on us and our employees, on you guys, on everybody, how can we make sure that this goes really smoothly? So that was like, those were the big goals.
Yeah, and those are big goals. Nick, anything else to add from kind of your view as an advisor?
Gosh, I mean, that really hits almost everything. I think the only thing I would add out to the employee population ahead of time and getting that survey feedback and understanding some of the pain points that you can then use to inform some of that.
Yep.
Covered it all.
Yeah. Cool. I think I heard you cut out for a second, but I think it was you guys went out ahead of time and actually got employee feedback via an employee survey, which we'll touch on. Maybe Whitney, let's kind of like keep that walk toward open enrollment. What did you do before open enrollment to kind of set yourself up for success as you're thinking about these goals?
Yeah. So we have a mid-year open enrollment, which is a little bit unusual. Our plans start July 1, but that meant that we wanted to start early. So we decided to do a benefits survey for our employees. Gosh, I think we did it back in either January or February, because at that point, they had that year's benefits for a few months. And so it was time where we could say, hey, how are you feeling about the benefits? What do you like? What are you looking for? And maybe if you're not enrolled, why aren't you enrolled? And that was really great. We got a lot of feedback. It was an anonymous survey, which I think is really important for the employees to be able to, essentially they're kind of complaining about maybe something that they don't really love. So it's good for them to be able to comment on that. And the feedback that we got from a lot of people was, yeah, it's simply too expensive. At the end of the day, when I look at my paycheck, my bottom line, what I'm taking home, I have a family. I just, I'd love to have insurance. I'd love to be enrolled in one of your plans, but they're just too expensive. So it was really helpful to get that survey. And then Nava is awesome about being really proactive. So they had reached out really early. I think, Nick, we had our first call in maybe March, where, what are your goals? We talked about those goals that I was saying, where I really want to try to get to large group, but I know why our enrollment numbers are down. We can look at these survey results and we can see that it's a huge part of it is a cost issue. People like the plans. They actually like what we're offering. That's great. It's just simply expensive. So then, Nick and another great colleague at Nava that we work with a lot, we had a brainstorming session where, they really walked me through our timeline for open enrollment. If we want to make changes, here's how and when we need to do it by, and here are some options. And, Nick gave me examples of, here's what other people your size are doing. Here's some suggestions. And the big suggestion was, you as a company should consider offering a higher contribution to the premiums for the medical care costs. Because, previously we had a certain percentage that we were paying towards our employee only premiums. But, he said, hey, if you at least have 1 or 2 plans or all your plans where you're contributing more, that's going to get your numbers up, which, that's not rocket science. Like, of course, people want to pay less and they're going to enroll. And my response to this in the past has always been, well, that's not going to fly with our leadership and our budgets. I mean, we simply can't just pay for healthcare costs for all of our employees. It's astronomical. And so we came up with, and a huge credit to Nick on this, but coming up with modeling a bunch of different scenarios. Okay, you have 3 different healthcare plans. What if you offered to cover 80% of a lower tier plan and, 70% of a middle tier plan and 60% of a higher tier plan, so that, those that want the most affordable healthcare are going to be enrolling in the, cheapest plan, quote unquote, but that way your costs are still reasonable.
Yeah.
And of course, we modeled it out because, as you know, every C-suite, every CEO, and I know my boss well, and I knew that the minute we said, hey, we want to increase our premiums for employees, our premium contributions, he would say, show me the numbers. So we did that. And, Nick, of course, was very helpful in modeling out a bunch of different scenarios and what it would look like, kind of these worst case scenarios. What if everyone enrolled XYZ? And the numbers were actually really telling that, hey, I think this is reasonable. I think that even if every single person enrolled in, XYZ plan, we actually this could fit within our budget still, and this could get us to where we need to go as far as our enrollment numbers. And so that's what we were able to present to our leadership. And we were actually able to get approval, which was amazing because it was kind of our best shot at being able to get our numbers up, was saying, hey, we're going to be able to offer a plan where employees are only paying 20% of the premium. They're still going to feel like they're getting good coverage. It's still a good plan. And we're going to make sure that they understand really well, like, what that plan covers. And hopefully we're going to get enough people enrolled to get over that 50% threshold.
No, I love it. Such a good story. And I think before I hand the mic over to you, Nick, I think one of the things we talk about at Nava is that contribution modeling, that basically what you just described is probably one of the least utilized tools to create win-win scenarios and, create enrollment opportunities without breaking the budget. Nick, anything else kind of from your standpoint in sort of prepping this pitch to leadership and trying to build the case?
Well, I do have some things, but let me just make sure you can hear me, because I of course, my Zoom is crashing for whatever reason, but that's how it is, as we know. Yeah,
you are good. Show business.
But yeah,
the show must go on, Nick.
Exactly. It's just like OE. You start an OE presentation and then some Wi-Fi just like, it's unstable. But yeah, I think Whitney, you touched on getting these models together for leadership, and I think on top of the modeling, which is very important. So those numbers are important to show the kind of the maximum liability and what we were thinking in terms of the impact of this philosophy change and the contributions. But I think also conversations between Whitney and leadership and myself, and some of the leadership team, also helped communicate kind of the human impact that we were looking to achieve, reducing the complexity of the small group as it is now, with some of the rate structures and the goals for simplicity and for ease of use down the line, as opposed to just a monetary change right now. And that was helpful in kind of selling that to the leadership team. It wasn't just this monetary decision. It was also, hey, this is an investment in the talent and the acquisition and the retention for this group moving forward.
I love that frame.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that story really resonates with me. I think like let's maybe shift gears to communicating to employees. So you set the stage by setting some really clear goals on what success would look like going through this open enrollment renewal process. Then you did the hard work, which was kind of financial modeling and then building the story around it for leadership, to why we should actually modify the way that we were contributing to plans. And now you have to communicate all this stuff to employees who, by the way, don't spend much time thinking about benefits, don't know what contributions and deductibles are. So oftentimes this is in one ear, out one ear. I think this is kind of one of the big pain points that we hear is like, oh my gosh, I spend so much money and time on this, but my employees don't value it. They don't understand it. So the question really is, I think, how do you and did you ensure that your colleagues and your employees really actually heard you on this and sort of both understood and valued what you were doing for them, Whitney? And maybe I'll start with you, and we can get Nick to fill in kind of some additional stuff while we've got our Love Actually slide up on the screen. Go for it, Whitney.
Communication is key. It's funny what you mentioned too, because even for those of us in HR that are, and in benefits that are constantly working with this, we're constantly reviewing plans and looking at plan options and premiums and deductibles and all this. We still don't always fully understand it. It is very complex. It's very complicated. And spending all this time, figuring out these plan options that we want to offer, I got very familiar with it, but you forget, these employees, this is not what they're spending their time on, which is great. We want them doing their jobs, but when it comes time for us to communicate it to them, you have to really break it down. And something that I really appreciate about Nava is this benefits guide that you have introduced to us. So prior to coming on board with Nava, we did not have just a one-stop comprehensive document that explained to employees, here's everything that is offered to you as a benefit through your employment with the Paskin Group, including, not just like you have health insurance. It's you have the option of health insurance. Here are the different plans. Here's even a snapshot of what those plans look like, what the deductibles are, what your co-pays are for certain doctor visits. It's all in this one document. And it's, it's everything from 401k to the healthcare benefits to ancillary benefits to EAP. And so that is something that was introduced and you guys actually built for us, which is awesome. And it looks really professional. And we share that with all of our employees. It's a huge tool that I constantly ask people to reference when they have questions. But that was something that was prepared once we had all of our, our new things for this open enrollment ready to go. That was prepared ahead of time. And then we were really strategic about making sure that the webinar, because Nick led a benefits webinar for our team, that happened just the week prior to open enrollment. So we didn't want to have it too far out because, then there's too much time in between when employees are hearing the information and when they actually get to go in and make elections. But you want to give them, a few days, a weekend, so they can go home. They need to talk to their spouse, significant other, read through the benefits guide. So we were very strategic about making sure that we had that, having the webinar with Nick, which, most of our company attended that. And that was great. Yeah. But a lot of times for webinars like that, people don't feel super comfortable asking questions in a large forum, especially when it comes to healthcare. Sometimes people want to be a little more discreet and private about that, cost, things like that. But Nick did a great job of explaining all the new features. We really hyped up the fact that we were, increasing these contributions as a company. And then we followed up. So not, most people attended the benefits webinar, not everyone. So the very following day, we strategically had our once a month company all call that we do just once a month always. It's just a 20-minute call. Our CEO speaks, our president. It's great, really informational. And it's like, not everyone checks their email. Not everyone reads the emails we send them. So we have these all calls specifically for information we really want people to hear and make sure we know they heard it. So after that, the next day we had the all call and we reiterated the Cliff Notes version of the benefits updates. And then we followed up with that or to that with an email, of course, to the whole company, letting them know, hey, this is when open enrollment's going to start. Here's a link to the benefits guide. Here is a link to the benefits webinar if you missed it. It's like, we are making this foolproof so that you cannot say, I didn't know, and I didn't hear, and I don't understand. And then, of course, I was going to be available and was available for questions, emails, and things like that, if people still had them. But it felt like we hyped it up. We made it exciting instead of just like humdrum, here comes open enrollment again. Or, yes, costs are going up. That's a bummer. It was like, but guess what? Here's all these exciting things. And like, aren't these benefits awesome to have? And, take advantage of these things. We have them available. Some of them are free, different types of life insurance. Some of them you have to pay for, but we contribute as well. So we tried to make it exciting and then strategic so that they didn't have too much time. And then when it opened, it was, hey, constant kind of reminders. This is an active enrollment. Everyone needs to go in. And we followed up once it closed or was nearing the end with just like thanking people that had gone in to do it. We appreciate you. This is the one time of year, unless you have a qualifying life event where you can make these changes. It's super important, and not letting it just fall off everyone's radar, because it's such a big part of your employment is this benefits time.
So it's great. Nick, maybe I'll hand it to you. I think too, and maybe touch on this. I think obviously we at Nava take the sort of open enrollment presentation very seriously, see it as an opportunity to really show up and deliver something that improves the brand of the company to their employees. And so maybe I'd love for, I think, and you're excellent at it. And so like maybe touch on some of the pro tips too on how you make that enrollment meeting memorable and valuable, and anything else that you kind of
and this was what we implemented with the Whitney's team as well, and that is the presentation. It is a dense presentation, and that's how it is like across the industry, right? You go to any company, their open enrollment presentation it's not like the most exciting when you think about it. But if you really get intentional with the communication in that presentation, and what I mean by that is develop anecdotes, develop narratives and stories, things that folks can empathize and understand. How does it actually impact them in the day to day? And I often throw humor in and try to make the anecdotes relatable and even funny, just because that's often a way to kind of drive something home in terms of retaining it in your memory and being able to remember this stuff, weeks later when your plan actually goes into effect. And then, like Whitney mentioned, having that webinar, having Q&As, allowing people to ask questions on their terms in their vocabulary instead of trying to interpret the wild world that is benefits vocabulary, deductible, out of pocket maximum, out of network, in network. It's almost designed to be arbitrary and vague to those who aren't living in it. And in HR, we live in it, so it doesn't faze us. But for the employees, it's a challenge. So I think those are kind of ways that we can kind of bring that presentation and level it up. Anecdotes, stories, narratives that engage and bring it down to that level of actual experience instead of just on a slide. And then also having that forum to have the interaction with the employees and allow the team to be hyped up, like Whitney mentioned. I think those are ways that I see OE, go from blase to, a happy ending.
Love that. Ooh, and you brought it up. Go for
I
it.
would add to that, Nick. Honestly, you were offering practical tips even in this webinar. I will not forget when you said, hey, and don't forget, if you call a doctor's office and you say, hey, do you take my insurance? They're always going to say yes, because they're always going to take your insurance. Whether or not it's in network or out of network is the real question. But if you're just saying, do you take my insurance? Of course they do. They're going to live it. And that it was so funny. It stuck with me because that's such a common thing that you would say. You would call a doctor and say, oh, do you take my insurance? But it's, oh no, is the insurance that I have within your network? Because that's going to be a huge cost difference at the end if it's in network versus out of network. And that was such a good tip that I learned when you were giving that webinar. I was like, oh, great one.
That is an awesome anecdote. Nick, maybe on the flip side, any common mistakes you see, employers, HR teams make in this OE process?
Yeah, I think, and Whitney, you were kind of talking a little bit about it in terms of that feeling of dreading open enrollment, and then it's kind of the humdrum announcement, and I think without that intention up front, starting with the surveying employees, moving into strategy with leadership, leveraging your broker relationship, and kind of coming up with a game plan, I see a lot of folks kind of just resign themselves to this inevitable feeling of doom and gloom that OE is just this hard thing to go through. You just got to get through it, grit your teeth. And then as a result, the communication isn't energetic. It's not a big deal. It's kind of just, here it is again, and go in and make your elections and don't ask me any questions because I don't have the time to answer. And then, I've even seen instances where there are increases to the rates, but it's not communicated until folks actually go into the Ben Admin system and enroll, and they're like, well, wait a minute, this is more expensive. Yeah. And so on the worst end of the spectrum, and in many ways, I think it's simply because of an overtaxing of the HR team, not enough resources allocated towards open enrollment and preparing for it, or the carriers weren't, pressured enough by the broker to get them their answers soon enough to build OE communications. Either way, it led to a kind of passive communication and engagement with employees, which then only leads to employees feeling like they've been slighted, and then not engaging, at best, and then feeling bad at worst about your benefits package.
That's to build on that too. We talk about this a lot. Like open enrollment is either a trust building or a trust eroding moment for an organization. And I think you just called it out, like not being plain spoken, clear about changes, whether they're great changes or challenging changes, plus the context is that's a trust eroding moment. And that's with your entire organization. So feel a lot of ownership on making OE a trust building moment for the organization. Whitney, anything on your side of things, kind of big mistakes to avoid or things that you've seen other HR leaders do?
Just being really proactive is so important, and starting early, because we all know how these pieces all have to fall into place. And there's usually a lot of different parties involved. There's, the decisions that have to be made by leadership. Then, you have to communicate that to your broker. You also have to make sure, for our example, we had these great scenarios that we were excited to do, but we had to make sure, can our payroll processing system, can our HRIS actually accommodate those? Like, is that something that we're actually even able to do in the system? And if we are, and it has to be built out, how long will that take? How are the carriers involved in that, and what's going to be affected from a carrier standpoint? So there's all these different pieces, and not everyone is as great of a communicator or as prompt of a communicator. So for me, it's been so important to have a partner like Nava where, you guys are understanding the issues, the time sensitivity, and you're willing to be the squeaky wheel with the carriers. And in our case, also with our HRIS to say, hey, we need to know what's the status on this. Are we able to do this? If not, we have to reroute, this is the timeline, we're coming up. So finding a person too, even within your carrier or your payroll processing system. I'm still a little old fashioned that way where, even though now we have everything is automated, we have all this AI, we have all these chat bots, nothing is more valuable than a human person that you can rely on. And, like I've got, Susan over at wherever that I know I can reach out to, and they're going to answer my question, and they're going to have the right answer. And even care, which a lot of these carriers, they're dealing with so many clients, but at least from my perspective with Nava, I know that Nick cares about our situation, and he cares about my stress level too. And like, he knows what I'm going to have to communicate to my employees and my leadership team. And so he is working on my behalf, and he is paying attention, and he is following up. And that's been so huge. So yeah, just kind of staying proactive, finding those people that can be your advocates is really important, because getting all those pieces to fall into place is challenging. But if everyone is working together and, understanding the goal, then it can go really smoothly, which it did this time.
So good. Two things I want to maybe underscore. I think you called out that like this is a pretty complicated project to manage, right? With many steps and many stakeholders. So you got to manage it like a complex project, which is, super proactive, managing, monitoring the steps. I think the second thing I think to build off too is it's a mistake I see all the time, which is HR leaders not realizing how much control they have over how much they should lean on their broker partner to do work. We take this as a core part of our service plan, whether it's building a beautiful benefits guide or really taking ownership on the enrollment or the HRIS system builds, things like that. And then we'll talk to HR leaders and they're like, I'm doing all of it myself. And I'm sort of just getting quotes. So I think that's just a good reminder, like lean on the partners that you have to do their jobs, in my opinion. And I think that's a really good call out. Speaking of partners, let's actually pivot to another really important partner who can also feel like an anti-partner, which is the insurance carriers that we're trying to actually get work done with, and the vendors that we're trying to place. It really stinks to be beholden to other vendors' timelines, whether it's that HRIS system that we're trying to get updated, or it's the insurance carrier. This is actually one of the biggest stress points that we hear from HR leaders. It's this like kind of like scream into the void pain point where like, I just can't move this stuff forward. So maybe Nick, I'll start with you, because I think Nava sees one of our big roles as we are the big stick, the squeaky wheel, the loud voice that's meant to advocate on behalf of our employer clients. How do you ensure carriers and vendors sort of adhere to, Whitney's timeline and open enrollment deliverables?
Yeah. It's I don't know if the word is irony, but these carriers are perceived as these big behemoths that are immovable, mountains of bureaucracy and red tape and group inboxes, and like Whitney just talked about with having a person to talk to. I often implement that same concept, and I think Nava does too. Nava builds relationships with these carrier partners. We know who to reach out to in the event of an issue that needs to be addressed quickly. And we also treat them, like responsible humans too. Even though they're on, part of the Blue Buka group or whatever it is, big carrier, we still say, hey, let's all agree on a timeline and hold ourselves accountable to that. And so with building those relationships, leveraging that human contact and holding each other accountable to timelines, I think we found a good formula for a successful kind of management of the carrier's end of the commitment, their end of the deal.
Yeah, love that. Whitney, anything else to add?
No, and I just like what you said about relying on, and I did rely heavily on Nava to have those partnerships in place. And it wasn't something I needed to take on myself, where it's like, okay, now you have to call the medical carrier, the dental carrier, the vision carrier. It's a lot. And especially for people in my position, which I know there's a lot of us where we're an HR department of one, and business as usual is still happening while open enrollment is happening. There's still onboarding, there's still offboarding, there's still, employee issues, conduct issues, there's still events, there's still all kinds of those things are all still happening. It's not just open enrollment during open enrollment time. So definitely being able to rely on the broker and those relationships that they've already established with the carriers is huge.
Yeah, I love that. Maybe on the flip side, just kind of thinking more creatively. What's a creative idea that you've seen used by someone else, or that maybe Nick, in your case, you've used, kind of on behalf of clients that you just want to implement that would be fun from an open enrollment standpoint, like out of the box stuff? Whitney, you want to start?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Or Nick?
No, go please, Whitney.
Okay. Okay. Well, actually for next year, I have a couple things that I want to do, and, maybe they're not like really fun and exciting, but at least from an HR perspective and from a sanity perspective, what I want to do next year is, and I've seen other people do this successfully, especially people who, do have limited resource, they are an HR department of one, is have like open enrollment hours. Because what happens after you get the benefits guide out and you get the resources out is now you are fielding emails and G chats and calls from people that have all these questions related to their insurance. and it's just, you want to answer them right away, but you're still doing all of your regular business, and it just becomes a lot. So getting those like frequently asked questions and almost having, templates, or maybe even making like a quick little video so that you can send that out to people if they are, because a lot of times people are asking the same questions. It's not really unique questions. Or having, hey, for the next week during open enrollment from 1 to 2 p.m., I am available for specifically open enrollment questions, and call me during this time or answer those emails during this time, because otherwise it can get really overwhelming. So that's something that I really want to do next year, because I did not do that this year. And then also I've heard now that, and a lot of HRISs, I think, do this automatically, but it's these kind of whole benefits summaries where it gives employees a snapshot of the benefits that they're receiving, and it's their pay, so their salary amount, it's their 401k match, it's their vacation time, and usually it's in like a pie graph, and it kind of shows them, you're not just making X amount of dollars per year salary. The company is actually paying, your salary, but then also paying your match, and then also paying this premium contribution. And I think it really shows them, because open enrollment tends to be what is this going to cost me? What is my expense from an employee's perspective? And turning it back around to also highlight, as an employer, here's what we're contributing. Like, here's what we're paying.
Mm-hmm.
Here are what we're offering as our benefit, and in actual dollar amounts of like, hey, annually, this is what we're contributing, and it's all part of your kind of overall compensation as an employee. So next year, I want to have that available so that when people are looking at their plan options, they can see like, oh, this is what the company is willing to do, because we want to retain you. You're a great employee. We want to offer great benefits. So this is the dollar amount that we're paying, because it's a large amount. So I'm excited about those two things for next year.
Those are great. I love those. And I think we can, Nick's already taking notes. He's excited. So yeah, open OE office hours, total rewards, or total compensation statement totally resonates with me. And I think you really framed out the why too. Nick, how about you? What's out of the box? What's exciting for you? OE.
Well, I am reeling from all of these. These are so great. For me, I think, and you already mentioned it, Whitney, but I have seen some pretty creative stuff with video, and I think that webinars and video for open enrollment kind of started on one end of the time commitment spectrum, in that it was like, here's our full 1 hour and 15-minute webinar for you to watch at your leisure. And then we moved on to, like Brainshark and tools that allow you to kind of jump through and time, time manage and just watch a certain, segment that you want. But I've also seen some interesting concepts of here's just a little sizzle 30-second or 1-minute video on your specific, like this company's specific out-of-pocket maximum, or how to find an in-network provider. Little consumable bites of video that are more in line with kind of the format of like the consumed media today. It's little TikTok videos, I guess.
Love it. That's so great.
Yeah, I love that. I think something that we're always tinkering with at Nava is like, how do you produce content that wants to be consumed by the people? And I think, that shorter format is really interesting. Maybe stay tuned on that. I think we might have some interesting opportunities there in the Nava member experience. This is awesome. Why don't we wrap with one question, which is, we've sort of gone through the kind of before, the during, and now let's talk about the after. So, post OE, in your case, so you set these big goals, you got through this process. Once the dust settled, how did you measure success, and did you hit those goals? And Whitney, maybe I'll start with you. How'd you measure success, and how'd you do against those goals that we talked about at the beginning?
Yeah. Well, as I stated, our big goal was to get over 50% enrollment. And I know we were just waiting with bated breath till the end of open enrollment closed to find out. And I think Nick was the first one who sent the email, and he's like, you did it. You got there, over 50%. And
Cool.
it was so exciting. And it was so exciting to be able to take that to our leadership and say, oh my gosh, these changes that we made, we actually did it. We got the enrollment numbers that we were hoping to get. And now, this is going to open up a whole new world, hopefully for us next year, if we can just keep these numbers up. So that was really exciting to be able to actually see that goal be met. And then, the other big thing was, okay, now let's just make sure that we have everything in place so that we don't have any issues. We don't have any errors, because now we have a lot of people that have enrolled that weren't enrolled before. We want to make sure, do they know how to access their insurance cards? Do they know how to see the information on how to get in-network doctors so that everything lines up and they're not paying a bunch of out-of-pocket costs? How do we make sure that they don't just show up at a doctor or dentist and then get denied because something happened between open enrollment and the carrier and there was a miscommunication there? So it was so exciting to celebrate. I actually did thank the team as well. We had our next all call, our July all call. It was a celebration. It was a thank you so much for a very successful open enrollment. We really appreciate everyone for taking the time. And, for those of you that had signed up for the first time, like, this is going to be great. If you have any questions, like, we're going to get through this and we'll help you out. So it was good. But then it was, now let's make sure that our ducks are in a row so that, from a billing standpoint and from the employee's perspective, they made the right choice. This is going smooth. This is going to be worth the money that's coming out of their paycheck, and we can have this be a good experience for them.
I love that. Nick, anything else to add from your lens?
Gosh, yeah. I can't think of anything. That's, I think for the most part, like what Whitney said, is that our main goal was that participation, and getting there was all the work we put in earlier before the actual open enrollment dates. I mean, of course, we had the webinar during the open enrollment, we had the Q&A, but all that work was put in. And then when we saw that we got there, looking at the participation percentage, I think Whitney's right in that also means there's more folks to support. There's more to do now, but this is a good problem to have. Yeah. And so I think that measuring the success for us was actually a narrow metric, in that we were just trying to drive this kind of single variable up, but there were so many things that led to that. Yeah. And so in many ways, it was a simple way of measuring success, but it was a complicated way to get there. Yeah. Simple to measure, hard to achieve. Whitney, how'd your CEO feel after you went through
it? He was like, "You're lucky." No, yeah. No, he was actually, yeah, he was really supportive, and it was really good. And, it was a good exercise just for the company in general, because if this worked to solve this issue, there's plenty of other things that this can apply to, from, an operations perspective and other facets of the company, where we can go, hey, just because we've been doing something over and over and over doesn't mean that we can't explore another way to do it. And maybe it's going to be a short cost increase in the meantime, but it's going to have these long-term effects. And especially because he has been the one that's been so focused on retention, this is a great way that we can increase retention, and that we can have our employees feel like they're really invested. Because I think the more things that you're tied to as an employee within your company, once you've got that 401k, you're enrolled in the benefits, you're participating in the give back events, you're doing these things, you feel valued as an employee, and you want to stay. You want to continue to give back. You want to continue to receive these benefits and these perks. And the people that are kind of not enrolling and a little bit checked out, I mean, those are the ones that you're going to lose. So company culture for us is huge, and this was another great way to build it. So it was very exciting and successful.
I love that. I just want to add one thing. I think the only other thing I'd add is that on the back end on this reviewing this whole thing is, it points for Whitney and her team. It points to a capability set that I think was really kind of driven home, which is Whitney and the HR organization can identify a goal, implement a strategy, and then execute that to completion in a demonstrable way, which is just another kind of feather in the hat for Whitney and her team, but also just a great way to kind of show that HR can drive, strategy that impacts the rest of the business in a positive way, and has the capability to identify that kind of thing and then commit to it, which I think is important as we look at the post-mortem on the OE.
I love that. And as you look toward next year, where you're in large group and there's a lot more opportunity to devise new strategies and save money. Kudos to you, Whitney, on guiding.
I can genuinely say that with Nick's help and after this experience that I am actually looking forward to open enrollment next year. I've never been able to say that before.
That might be the greatest win of all. The greatest win of all. Well, awesome. I think we're close to time. This is so fun, Whitney. Thank you for not only making it informative, and I think there were just so many great anecdotes sprinkled throughout, but also making it fun. Nick, thank you for being a great sidekick, along the journey. Why don't we wrap up? I want to thank everyone, who's on the call for joining us. Hopefully, the Rom-Com references made it a little bit more of a kind of a fun journey and brought a smile. A couple of maybe calls to action or follow-ups. First off, just a reminder to download your open enrollment project planning template. We call it a template. It's so much more than that. It is a project manager. So if you don't have a Nick and you're actually trying to do this on your own, this will get you a long ways in terms of setting this up and setting up your next steps. Secondly, if you've got any specific questions around the content today, maybe you've got an anecdotal question for Whitney on, hey, how'd you do your thing? Or how are you approaching culture? Just email me personally at Brandon@Nava Benefits, and I'll make sure that we kind of connect the dots on getting answers. And then last but not least, we do a thing going into renewal season, which is we'll just provide a second set of eyes for your HR team around your renewal strategy. We call it a diagnostic. It's free of charge as you're going into open enrollment and really trying to lock this stuff down. So feel free to email me if you want a benefits diagnostic. We'll get you set up one-on-one with an expert, and hopefully that'll give you more peace of mind. So with that, really appreciate the time from the two of you, and that was a lot of fun. So let's go to the group that is watching. Let's go crush open enrollment this year, make it a Rom-Com success story. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you all soon.